Good morning. Welcome to Marketing and Mindset here in Clubhouse. I am so excited to get started today. It is going to be in a room. I am going to be in the background today, and Connie is going to take over. And we're going to have an amazing guest who will be popping in here in a little bit. And she's going to be talking about changing behavioral patterns, which is an excellent topic that I'm excited to learn about. So with that being said, Connie, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and take over, and I'm going to check on our guest speaker. I'm Vanessa, and I'm done talking.
Thank you, Vanessa. This is Connie. I go by La Doc. I'm a Christian mindset stress coach. And if you've been in a room with me before, you know that I say that stress is an emotional response to a situation. And as emotional beings, we respond with our emotions all the time, whether we believe it or not, whether we realize it or not. And so I help my clients stress less and live more. And today we're here talking about behavioral patterns in the social media marketing trends room with our special guest, Irina. She's going to help us change some of those patterns so that we can be more fruitful, more efficient. Irina, go ahead and unmute your mic and introduce yourself.
Hey, hello everyone. Yes, my name is Irina, and I'm a life and mindset coach. I work primarily with what I call forward thinkers, people who want to create something big in their lives, whether it's business or I don't know, writing a book or whatever it is for them that's important for them. And I work primarily with subconscious mind. So, like, it's mindset, but we're going deeper, working with subconscious mind and rewiring patterns, like reshifting, reshuffling those patterns of old behaviors, of old mindset, old thinking, so it doesn't get in the way of creating those big things in life.
Perfect. Thank you. And it's Irina, right?
Irina or Irina.
Okay. I was using my Hispanic accent, so please forgive me.
That's fine.
Perfect. So today, for everyone in this room, we take this room very casual. We'd like for you to raise your hands, ask questions. We also have the chat function. So if you have any questions, you're afraid to raise your hand, go ahead and add your questions in the chat. We'll be looking at them and answering them. But this room is for you. So take advantage, ask the questions. You have the expert panel available to answer anything you like. So, Irina, my first question for you is, tell us a little bit about how we are. You mentioned the word deprogram. I'm very familiar with that, but I'd like for you to tell the audience in the room, what does that mean, and how are we programmed, and how do we deprogram, to kind of give them the basics before we go into some more in-depth questions.
Yeah, it's something I think it's kind of, you're right, it's very kind of quite well-known concept right now, right? I think if you're a little bit into self-development, you would know that everything that we learn, especially in the childhood up until age 7, that's where our brain is kind of in this kind of hypnosis state the most. Hypnosis is like lower frequencies of mind. So we like everything that we hear, everything we see around, all the meanings that we create about the situations, not necessarily the situation itself, but how we see it and how we perceive it in that age, is what kind of stays in our, like it kind of gets absorbed like a sponge into our subconscious mind, right? So what I mean when I say that our brain is in alpha state is that we don't, like, our rational mind is not switched on yet, right? So it's not yet functioning. So we don't have ability to analyze or rationalize as kids, and everything kind of gets into our long-term memory, and then it plays out in our adulthood. And saying that, it's not only the young age, it's not only like the kids' age, right? We, like, probably like the majority of our behaviors and thinking patterns, they are created in that period. But there are also situations, also things that happen later on in life in different situations, some repetitive things, repetitive reactions, or response that we give to situations that we experience, things that we think and do. It's like habits, right? Any habit is created by repetitive, by repetition. It's the same with thinking, responding, reacting. So all that is kind of gets coded into our system, into our like subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is essentially everything that runs on automation, from digestion and language, how we speak, to like our habits and thinking patterns and behaviors. So it's like 95% of our daily life, of all, everything that's happening to us. Like they say, 95 to 97% is essentially run by subconscious mind. So that's the deep programming. I guess it's, yeah, that's what it is. If you want to add something, Connie or Vanessa.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that baseline is really important so that people understand that there's a certain time when we're developing that we absorb all of these things and they go into this computer in our brain for a place of resource, of reference, so that we have a place to reference when things happen in our lives. And so tell us a little bit about why deep programming is important. What are some of the things that can happen if we don't align or reteach ourselves, the correct way or the best way?
Yeah, so if we're talking in the in the marketing and like business space, a lot of these things, like obviously, like we are, you're human in life, and you're human when you go and do your marketing and do your business. So like your subconscious mind doesn't change. Your conscious mind, like we consciously may think differently, because we switch our brain from like like home, I don't know, kids to like work, right? So we think different things, but subconscious mind is still running the like the majority of your behaviors, right? It's still running the how you feel, especially, right? It shows up very much in in the way we react emotionally and how we feel about situations, right? It's the emotional reactions. It's that nervous system, right? That which is part of subconscious mind as well, in certain situations. So, let's say you need to do something that you haven't done before. Maybe it's networking, right? Or speaking in public, or presenting your offer, or pitching your offer to someone, or you may be on a call with a potential client. And no matter how you may think, in like your rational part of mind, right? Like you may think good thoughts and all this positive thinking idea that you need to think positively and believe in yourself. Sometimes it just all kind of like it becomes irrelevant, and your body kicks in. Your body gives you that emotion, that the feeling of whether anxiety or stress or fear, and it just seems like you can't do anything about it, right? No matter how positively you think, how much you believe in yourself, how much like journaling you done beforehand, like your body still um, like it it jumps into reaction much sooner than your conscious brain. And this is where that kind of subconscious like reprogramming comes in, right? So it's because your subconscious mind is giving that response first, right, before you even think about what's going on, right? And then in the moment, it's really hard to change that, right? Because you're already presenting, or you're already on the call, and you have to speak, and like your mouth is getting dry, and like you lose your words, and you forget everything that you've learned how to present yourself and how to speak. And like these are like instantaneous examples, right? Like the kind of short and quick examples. There are also, things like indecisiveness, for example, or perfectionism, which are kind of obvious, right? If you are fairly indecisive, which was like a big thing for me as well, you can't, like, it just takes you so long to take a decision. You always fear to make a wrong decision, and you're looking for that right, perfect plan or strategy before you take an action. Um, and there are also some subtle behaviors, right? Subtle things that we sometimes do not connect with our like personal life or how we behave like normally in daily life, which is sometimes, we kind of dim our own light, so we don't make people uncomfortable, and that usually comes from people pleasing, right? If we do people please in life, like daily life, like in personal life, then most likely that's gonna show up in our marketing, in our business as well. Or you might be avoiding conflicts, right? If you're avoiding conflicts, then it might be difficult for you to discuss your pricing or make offers to people, like talking about your products, right? It's or like raising prices, right? So because you're avoiding the resistance from the other side. You don't want to go into that conflict. You don't want to go into that like discussion and like hear no to your offer, and things like that. So there are a lot of things that can influence and can kind of come through our behaviors in business, which come from our like daily life, which is that kind of subconscious like programming, those like behavioral thinking, behavioral patterns. And usually like it's not always like, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes like not sometimes, like those behaviors are actually there to protect us, right? They're protecting us from the danger, from, as children, we learn these behaviors so that we feel safe, so that we feel comfortable, we stay loved and cared for. It's just something that we take with us in like life, into adulthood, into our businesses, into our families, and it doesn't serve us anymore, right? So that's essentially how I see that in my clients' businesses, in my clients' lives, and in my own life as well. It's like my personal experience, also, especially around the indecisiveness, people pleasing. That's something I've been working with myself.
I love that. I think it's really important for people to know that there are habits that we have that come from those underlying experiences that become those reference points. And so, like you said, you may be fully prepared, you may have practiced, but then it's time for the show and you forget, you forget, or you trip over your words, or you're not sure, or there are some underlying things, or experiences that cause us to do that. And so, tell me a little bit about what are some things we should ask ourselves to kind of start being mindful of some of the things that will trip us up based on that programming that we've had from when we were younger. We're going into business, and so one of the biggest things I think that people are afraid of is they're afraid of not making the right step, when in reality, my opinion is that they fear success because they don't really know what that feels like. We know what failure feels like. We failed a million times, but success is something a little different. And so a lot of times, people are afraid to take a step or to take a chance because they're it's the unknown. It's fear of the unknown. And so, are there certain questions that you tell your clients to start thinking about, or maybe your followers on Instagram, what are some questions they can ask themselves to start to be mindful, so they can start to realize what patterns they're in and what type of behavior they need to change?
Yeah, very good question. Big question, right? um, I like what you said about fearing success. I think like there are like success is probably like fearing success might be kind of an overarching thing, and underneath that fear of success there might be thing a little bit more, maybe a little bit more specific for each individual. And sometimes it even translates into fear of failure, right? Like with fear of success, because like, what if I get successful and then I will need to hold it all together and I will need to like work really hard so that it doesn't, so that I don't fail, right? So in fact, like sometimes like the underlying thing is, again, comes back to fear of failure. A fear of failure is a lot of it comes with fear of being judged and fear of like how we're going to be seen in front of other people. And primarily, like it's not that we fear things and facts that are going to happen to us. We fear the emotion and the feeling that we're going to feel when that thing happens, right? So if I get too successful, what will people think about me? What will my friends will think about me, right? What if money will change me? Or what if I fail and people will judge me? How will I feel inside then? Like what emotion is going to cause me? Of course, it's going to be like embarrassment, it's going to be frustration, there will be a lot of self-judgment. So all these feelings is what we essentially fear, right? What we're trying to avoid. And I always say that, feelings don't kill us, right? And as long as you can allow yourself to feel, and this is something that Corey, I'm sure like you work with your clients on that as well, since you're working with emotions, is that the ability to process emotions and process feelings. And the more we learn that in, like we practice that in like small portions in a way, the more we like start trusting ourselves that we can do that with bigger emotions as well, right? Like there is no emotion that kills us. There's only our how we take that emotion, how we respond and react to that emotion, right? And what we make it mean, right? So emotion is always like emotion is neutral, right? Feeling embarrassment is just feeling embarrassment, but what we make it mean is a different story, right? If I feel embarrassed, then we create a story about that embarrassment. And we create a story very often outside, not always, but often it's like outside our own brain. So we are thinking about like that how can I put it? Like that self-judgment, that self-critic voice is often not our voice. It's someone else's voice, right? And I often ask, like, if we say if you're afraid to start something, if you're afraid to jump into the deep waters of business and like I don't know, post something first for the first time or start that marketing campaign, and you have that critic voice in your head telling like who you are, who do you think you are, and you're definitely gonna fail. You've never done it before. I suggest to ask whose voice that is. If it's not yours, whose voice it is. It might be that you're thinking about it might be your I don't know, your parents' voice, or your I don't know, best mate voice, or someone, if we're talking about social media, maybe some of your ex-classmates or your ex, right, who will see that post and judge you, right? So we often reflect what we expect from other people to think about us into our head, and like that critic voice sometimes speaks on behalf of someone else. So that's kind of one thing, right? It's the emotional aspect of it and that critic voice. I also, like, when I work with my clients, I usually we kind of link their fears about certain things, so they're like the way they feel uncomfortable in certain areas of their businesses. We explore where does it show up in their personal life as well. So it's that link between the business and personal life. And the way to do that in very like simple high level terms is to understand how that situation makes you feel. Again, like exploring the emotional side of it, exploring where I'm not gonna go too deep into it, but like we explore like, well, the emotion is in your body and things like that, and then ask yourself, what does it remind me of? Like, where else do I show up like that in my life? And where does it come from? Right. There are a bunch of like different questions that you can ask, and I can share a link to like a little challenge, like a 6-day challenge that I created recently, which is like a deep dive into your kind of subconscious mind and into your mind, essentially, maybe not necessarily always subconscious, but like into diving into your mind and checking in what's going on, like where am I not allowing myself to color outside the lines, where am I being too critical of myself, what voices do I have in my head and things like that. So it's a really nice, interesting journey of like self exploration and self reflection.
I love that. Is that do you know how to pin a link on the top? Because I'd love to talk a little bit more about that, and have the people in the group be able to pick up that document or that link. I have the one to your Instagram and your link tree, but I'm not sure if it's on there. That'd
Yeah,
be
it's
great.
actually on. Yeah, it's on my link tree. It's called 6 day. Let me see what it's called. 6 day deep dive in.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Let me grab it from your link tree and then post it up there. Tell me a little bit as to so um, when we have these thoughts, what is something you would recommend we do to stop the thought or to embrace it? So when I obviously coach through emotion, right? You coach a little bit different. So when my clients have a particular thought, I tell them to focus on the emotion and kind of move from there. What would you say if somebody has a thought like oh my god, I'm on this, let's say for example, I'm on this clubhouse and I really don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm afraid that everybody's going to realize that I don't know what I'm talking about, and then you feel like this imposter syndrome. If a client were to feel that, I would tell them, tell me about your emotion and how that makes you feel. Would you approach that in a different way? How would you approach somebody who says, I want to do this, but like, what if people think I'm a fake when I've really worked really hard? Like, how do I prove myself, or I'm not good enough? What are some tips that you tell people when they have those types of thoughts? Because those are thoughts that are not of us. They're thoughts of ideas that people have put in our mind. So it's somebody else's voice. What do you tell them to focus on?
Yeah, such a good question. I would say definitely going to the side of emotions as well. Like I think it depends on the thought and on the situation, right? On the context. Sometimes I would just play with the thought itself, right? I would not like go and like jump into like positive thinking. I would actually go and like explore, but like in a playful way. Okay, so what, like, who's if it wasn't your voice, whose voice would that be? If you keep thinking that way, like there is an exercise I do sometimes with emotions, but like we can do that like with you can do that with thinking as well, with a thought, because like obviously thoughts create our emotions, right? It's the direct link in our bodies. Um, if if like the going like deeper into that thought and just like imagining, what if I was to think this thought and feel that emotion over and over again, and like just continue thinking about it, and we almost like meditate on that, and like you imagine how you think this thought for a day, for like 2 days, for weeks, and then for months, and then it gets worse, and then it just expands, and like it becomes this huge monster in your head, and like you're feeling awful, and you like see how it affects other people as well around you, how it affects your results. And what happens, interestingly, is that I know it's not very pleasant, right? The first part is definitely not very pleasant. But the way your brain starts responding to that is just, it goes like it sees the danger even more, right? It sees like the other side of the danger, and it goes like, "Ooh, that's actually not very pleasant, right? Especially with all these emotions, with all these terrible feeling in my body, and with all these horrible results. Like, why would I do that to myself? Like, what if it's never gonna end, right? Like this horrible thought that I have in my head, right? Which doesn't seem that horrible in the beginning, but when you start like expanding that and making it into that beast, that's when your brain feels like, ooh, I don't want this anymore, right? And then we switch to, it's almost like processing that, right? That's the processing part of that thought. And then we switch into like, what do I want to do differently, right? How do I want to show up differently? How do I want to feel differently? And that's where I would go through the emotion route as well. So instead of that feeling of like fear or nervousness, how would you like to feel differently? And from there, like, what do I need to think to feel that way, right? What do I want to think? What's the truth? What's the truth? What is the believable thought that I cannot? It doesn't have to be like, oh yes, like I can conquer the world and I'm the best, and I will just be like the perfect public speaker or whatever, like from tomorrow, right? It has to be believable to you. It has to land in your body well. It has to like land comfortable in your body, so that your body changes the state, right? And like the reprogramming part of it happens in a kind of similar way, I would say. This is something that you can do on your own. Reprogramming part is essentially we reshuffle the memory. And to be fair, like I have to say, like with all everything that we talk about, the subconscious mind and the programming, I think it can be perceived a little bit like a heavy and like a big thing, something that is like 95% of our mind. It's very heavy. It's very difficult to change. It's actually not. Interestingly, the reprogramming itself happens. It can happen like in one session. Right? It's not like not always, but very often it can, like the mind can just reshuffle things in our head if you do it like correctly. If you work with your body, if you work with your emotion, with your like five senses, it can change like instantaneously, right? And forever and ever. Like we're just changing a memory. And the memory changes by like every time when we bring up something in our head, like if for example you're afraid to speak up on a clubhouse, that might, because that certainly comes from certain memory from the past. Maybe you tried it before. Maybe generally you know that you're not a very good, you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of other people, a group of people, right? There must be a reason, a reference, which gives you that idea that you're not going to be, that you might fail, right? You might not be good. So there is a memory of the past. And whether you remember when it started, you might need to remember. You sometimes, like, you don't even need to think about the first time when it started. It's all the therapy side of it. You can just remember like a previous memory, previous time when you felt the same way, when you felt like confused or intimidated, or when you kind of lost your words. It might be like a similar situation, not necessarily exactly the same. It might be like you just spoke to someone else, like another one person, and you felt something, like you had a thought that you're saying some some wrong things or whatever. And every time when we bring that memory back into our head, it changes. It's the neuroscience, right? It's like the memory is only the real and fresh. Like the memory is only real when it's like the first time memory. Every time we bring it back into our head, it changes a little bit, and we can intentionally change that memory as well. So we can reshuffle that state of mind, that feeling in our body, how we perceive the situation, and working with, again, I mentioned that a little bit, with our five senses, with so-called submodalities in our body, to kind of change that state. And then that change state will give us different thoughts, like almost like by default you're going to be thinking differently, because your body will feel differently, and your nervous system will respond differently. And just as in the example of that, public speaking, when your body remember, the body responds first before you even think about it, right? So if your body responds in a calm way, in a confident, certain state, right, that like calm state of your body, you will send different signals to your brain, right? So that thought of I'm embarrassed, or like I'm afraid to speak, it's just going to be so unfamiliar to you. You're just going to be like, oh, really? Like, have I ever even like considered thinking that way? Where has it gone? Right. So again, I don't want like the listeners to think that it's something like really heavy, and you need to work for years, and to change that state and to change those patterns. No, it's actually fairly easy, and it can be done pretty quickly.
Sorry, here I am talking with my mic muted. I love that. I have a story to tell. So I had a friend who, I'm helping with, kind of go through some thoughts that I feel are a little toxic, from the programming that she had when she was younger. And one of the comments that she had was, well, I think that I feel abandonment issues. And I said, really? Why do you think that? Have you reflected? Have you had, an opportunity to think about it? And she says, yeah, I one of my first memories of feeling abandoned was when I was a young child. There was a bunch of adults in the house, and I decided to hide under the dining room table, and I waited there forever, and no one came to find me. And so it got to the point where I just got up and I'm like, wow, nobody even cares that I'm alive, right? And I said to her, how old are you? She's like, oh my God, I must have been like 4 or 5 years old. I said, okay, let's think about this. Children don't know the they don't realize time. I mean, neither do we sometimes we say, oh my God, it's going to be 2 minutes, and it takes us 20 minutes to do something, right? Or it's 10 minutes before we have to leave the house, and we're like, oh, I have enough time to do a certain thing. And when you come to realize, you're completely late and it's already been half an hour, right? So we really don't have a very good perspective of time. Well, children don't have that perspective of time either. So I said to her, how long were you there? And she goes, oh my God, I must have been there for hours. And I said, really? Don't you think you might have been there for maybe seconds? And she started laughing. She's like, why would you say that? And I said, because children are not going to sit somewhere for hours. Did you fall asleep? Did you, I mean, to be there for hours, you must have been bored and fallen asleep, and the room might have changed and the people walked out. And think about your surroundings. And as she's thinking about this memory, she's like, what, I don't really know. I'm like, exactly. So here you are, creating this memory or recreating this memory. Every time you think about it, you recreate it and you get more upset. And you now are talking about abandonment. And now you're saying you were there for hours. What if you were literally were there for seconds, less than a minute, and you got tired and you're like, oh, no one's looking for me. Let me get out of here. You held on to a memory that maybe didn't even mean that at that time, and you associate now this feeling of abandonment from that particular memory, when a memory is really false information. The only information that you know for sure to be true is what's currently happening. Because what you're doing is you're picking up a reference. When you have a memory, you're going back into your catalog of experiences and you're saying, oh, I'm going to reference this one experience. And the way that you bring it up depends on how you're feeling that day. You know, you may bring up a memory that a month ago made you sad. And it's the same exact memory, but you're in a different state of mind today, and so today you don't feel as sad and you feel more melancholic. So I explained to her, when you pull up a memory, it's like pulling up a summary of what happened. And every time you look at that summary, you're going to pick up something different depending on how you're feeling that day and what point of state of mind you're in. So I love that you said that about memory, because I think that's really important. We bring up or we remember what's significant to us at the moment, because if that is not significant to us at the moment, we're not going to pick that memory. We're going to pick a completely different one. So I think that we also have to be mindful of what we tell ourselves and what voices we allow to be heard over and over again. I know that for example, I training to run a half marathon. Never run before. I've been told all my life, you can't run because you're asthma. You know, you really can't do exercise because you're asthma. And so all my life I've thought that. I never went to physical education. I always had a doctor's note. I was always excused from going and doing any exercise. And so when I first started training, I was like, my God, this is so tough. Now I understand why people said, you know, people with asthma can't do it. But here I am 3 months into my training and I'm running 6 to 8 miles, you know, every other day. Had I continued to believe the voices that were programmed to me when I was younger, saying, you can't, don't do that, you can't do that, you're not good enough, you can't breathe, you're going to get sick, you know, that kind of thing, and never really experienced it or thought, you know, I wonder if those voices are correct, and gone out and thought for myself, I wouldn't have the mindset that I have today, that, you know, it's not about who's gonna let me, it's about who's gonna stop me, right? So I love that you said that, because I think memories are really important in making decisions today, but I also think that they can be very detrimental. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very, I think, like relatable story, in a way that, you know, how our like young kids' memories show up in our lives. But I also want to say to that sometimes, like, you know, with you know, obviously, like, it's a great, amazing thing that we become very aware of how our childhood memories and how we've been brought up, and you know, all the memories play up in our life, in our adult life. It's really great. Like, I think it's the awareness is like it's going to change so much in the next generations as well, because the more we get aware of that for ourselves, the less we're going to pass it on to our kids as well, right? So I think there will be less traumatic, but still will be some trauma, because again, you know, as in your in a client's example, or friends example, it's also like, it's not the situation itself, it's how is the perception of situation, right? It's how she as a kid, as a child, perceived that situation, and how she perceives that now, right? It's the meaning that we create, because like, you can't be a perfect parent, right? You just, like, there is no way we cannot leave any trauma in our kids, because kids, they have their own brain and they create their meanings themselves, right? So we cannot change that. So the point that I'm making is that with all this awareness, sometimes we like use it against ourselves. We like, we hear that, you know, all like the childhood can be like some trauma comes from childhood, and there might be a time in my life that in this case, for example, I felt, abandoned, and now like it plays up in my life. And part of it is that we can make it, again, like a little bit too big of a problem. And like, I'm not saying that every situation is not a big problem, but the very thought and the very idea that it's a big problem, that it's a big pattern, that it's heavy, that it's difficult to change, is what is going to make it difficult to change, right? The Sometimes we can even pick unnecessarily things that we think are like affecting us, and like the more we think about it, the more we dwell in it, the more we kind of boil in that idea, and kind of making it almost an excuse, right? I don't do this because in my childhood this and that happens, and now I can't do this like in my life, right? So it doesn't always happen. Like most of the time people would like think about something, go like, oh, it just comes from my childhood. Okay, so, I'm grown up now. I'm going to change that. I don't need that anymore. And, I'm just going to think differently from now on, right? Sometimes you need to do some work around it when it just doesn't feel like, it goes out of your body. You still feel that. Again, this is that emotional and body response. But sometimes we also make it a bit more complicated than we should. And we like overstress our attention on that, right? So, and again, that's why I'm saying it can be so as simple as just like changing perspective on, as you say, like around timing, right? Just to see the situation differently, just to, because we don't like the memory is like, we don't memorize facts, we like memorize facts, like okay, we memorize facts much less than we memorize the feeling and the thoughts that we had in the situation, right? Like remembering a nice holiday somewhere, you would remember how you felt in that whole, like in that, I don't know, the sandy beach, by the water. You would remember like the thoughts, the feeling, the sensations that you had, right? And every time you will think about it, it will change slightly. You will change, like, depending on your mood, depending on what you know now, depending on your like experiences after that occasion, right? Maybe someone told you about this place, something, maybe something happened, like, and we constantly like changing and shifting those memories, right? And yeah, in case with this story, I guess again, like something happened, and she created some other, like she put some colors into the story, she put some like different narratives, also with knowing now that these things affect us a lot in our adulthood. Put like maybe she has put it like an extra weight on that story, and that feel like the word abandonment is a big word, right? It's a heavy word, right? The way our body perceives that, the word itself, and like part of like my like passion and like geeky stuff is that I pick on words a lot. I pick on like how people speak and how they explain the situation. The very like words in the sentences that we use can tell me a lot about what's going on in their like subconscious mind, and it also affects how we feel, like massively, right? Like you can't underestimate that. And like coming back to the word abandonment, or I don't know, like loneliness, or like all these words, it's just like, just notice how that feel when you say that word. It definitely doesn't feel nice, right? So you want to pick something else. You want to pick like different words, the way you describe that. And sometimes just putting a little bit of like lightness and even humor to those patterns, to whatever is happening to you, to the difficulties, actually can help a lot.
I love it. I love the conversation today. I've pinned to the top the document that you talked about, the 6 day guide. As we're getting close to closing down the room. Can you tell us a little bit about where we can find you, if people want to work with you, if they want to ask you questions, what's it like working with you, and what offers do you have?
Yeah, sure. I'm on mostly on Instagram, Irina Krasko _coaching. I think it's in my handle here as well. And on LinkedIn, I'm Irina Krasko. And so this specific link that Connie has pinned, it's like it's a good starting point if you want to do some like self-exploration and self-reflection and do like some journaling. Sometimes, like especially if you like doing journaling, it's going to be great for you. If you don't like doing journaling, that's a good way to start, right? I would recommend to go through the like 6 days. That's essentially you will be receiving emails 6 days in a row with different sets of questions, and they're all linked to some concepts that kind of I have developed through my work with clients, through my like living and breathing personal development myself. And I just think that some concepts can be a little bit misleading and a little bit like, you know, the way that we can use that against ourselves, just like an example that I gave just now, that I think when we kind of shift our perception of those ideas and of those concepts, it can make it actually easier for us to create that change. So yeah, it's a good practice to do it like 6 days consecutively in a row. I would recommend that, and to see what comes out. And it's best practice is to write down. I always suggest when you work on your own, when you do like this self kind of reflection, self coaching, it's best to write things down because it just gives your mind space and ability to give you more, right? Not just like when we think thoughts in our heads, we limit the amount of thoughts that can come out of our head. When we write it down, there's just so much more that can come out. You'll be surprised. So, yeah, definitely recommend to start there. And the way I work with my clients, you can reach out on Instagram or LinkedIn again, but I would like rather, you know, you like if you can respond to one of my emails, because sometimes like the DMs like they get lost, right? Especially if it's not my connection and I don't see them right away. But the way I work with my clients, so depending on like it's very like, kind of tailored to every person, like what your goals are, what you want to create, whether you want a support in specific area of your life, you know, like that example that Connie gave, like, oh, I'm afraid to speak in public, right? That can be a very short-term work, right? It can be like 3-4 sessions and we can, you know, deal with it. Or if you want a longer support, then I work with some of my clients for like 6 months, and that's like a long-term proper support when we dive into everything that comes up and like everything that comes up in life, in business, in relationships. So as I said in the beginning, I'm a life coach as well. So it's like going through those thoughts and those feelings every single time, and everything, you know, changes in life and things come up and you know, challenges come up. Sometimes that one thing that you work on can kind of cascade down into all areas of your life, right? So it's almost like all-encompassing change. So yeah, again, depending on your goals, on what you want to change, what you want to create, we come up with a plan and with a term. So, but usually it's like between like 4 weeks and up to 6 months. And I work, you know, online. I don't know if it needs to be said.
Of course. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And for those of you in the room, if you're interested in having more conversation with her, make sure you follow her here on Clubhouse, and then follow her off on Instagram and start asking your questions, and start download that 6-day guide. That's going to be your first step to start working with her, or at least to start the mind shift that you would need to get into a new paradigm, a more efficient more efficient flow. Thank you, Irina, for everything that you've presented today. It was truly a pleasure to have you here. I'm I'm gonna close the room in a little bit, but I do want to let everybody know that we are in Clubhouse every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the Social Media Marketing Trends Room. We always talk about marketing and mindset. Vanessa, my Clubhouse bestie, and I, we have special guests twice a month. And once a month, we specialize either on mindset of itself or on one of the social media platforms, whether it be Instagram or Pinterest. So if you're interested in coming to any of our Clubhouse rooms, go ahead and follow me. Follow Vanessa as well. You'll see our calendars, and you'll see when we're on here, so you can come on and learn a couple things, maybe meet some new people. But we thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It's been a wonderful time here with Irina. My name is Connie. I go by La Doc. You can find me here on Clubhouse on Wednesdays, or continue the conversation over on Instagram. Irina, any final thoughts before we close the room?
I think I just want to kind of recap. Like, I think one of like the not main takeaway, but like the idea that it doesn't have to be complicated, right? It doesn't have to be hard and heavy. Things can be changing pretty quickly, and you can make changes easily, whether it's like you working with yourself or with a coach. Like, you can find help, you can find support, and just don't make it too complicated. That's the last thing that I want to leave everyone with.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. We'll be here again next week at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with a new special guest. Thank you for hanging out with us. Have a great day, and I'll be closing the room in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.